everybody. Welcome along to the podcast. It is the League and Order podcast. Bit of a purge valve for us league fans. Kiwi purge valve, where we talk about the Kiwi side of things, looking over at the NRL and stuff. Luckily enough to have Lavina good with us, Tony Kemp, and special guest Blake Ayshford. Aysh, you play your cards right, good sir. You might just find another way into this podcast. All right, so we welcome you along.
Good luck,
we welcome you. Let's start. And Blake, this is clearly a big position for you to be in. Let's lead off with the fact that the Warriors got rid of their head coach, Stephen Kearney. What did we were near the team when it happened. What was your take on it and why?
So I flew back to New Zealand on Thursday. I left a happy camp. Being honest with you, since the resumption of play, the Warriors were at that time 2 wins and 1 losses. Now we know 2 and 2. I left a happy camp. All the boys, happy with Mooks, happy with the coaching staff. There was no divide or anything. I think it's the wrong timing for the call. I think just the way that they went about it on the Saturday morning, 9:30, after the game, I just think that if that was the decision they wanted to come with, I think that maybe let the season play out a lot longer or maybe further down the track, because I don't see the benefit to our team, the Warriors, with the coach not there anymore. Like, what will another coach that's already in that system bring? You can't bring change because there's no preseason. You can't change much. You're over there, and plus you got to remember all the players, and like even Mooks gave up his family life to go over there, and everyone's done this for the game and for the club. I think personally that it was the wrong call. I think it was the wrong time for it. If it was going to be that case, maybe wait till the end of the year.
I know where you're coming from, Blake, because when I first found out the news, it's not like so many people in the rugby league fraternity didn't want it to happen, but it's all about timing. I mean, the sacrifice the Warriors and also Mooks has done to get overseas, and the whole, cancel that contract now, not only will it possibly cost a lot of money, but just the dissension in the ranks that it will cause. So I was really surprised by the timing. I kind of felt like the Warriors were just going to cruise their way through this year because they were playing away from home and it wasn't going to be their best year. So if they're going to make a decision like that, either make it pre-season or post-season. And it's one of those weird seasons because of COVID. But when I found out you were coming on the show today, I didn't just want to hear your opinion, but I was hoping you would share with us how the players are feeling. You don't have to name anyone, but in general, what is the culture like within the club since they've said to their coach, you're not going to be our leader anymore?
Mate, they're not happy at all. I'm going to be honest with you. There's a bit of a bit of rift. I think I said I wasn't going to name names. The boys are there and they were filthy, and it was quite emotional when he got up and addressed the team, because they had review on that day and then it got canned and none of the players knew why. And obviously the leaders found out first in the afternoon. Mooks told them, and I know the players aren't happy, especially to throw a spanner in the works. So what a lot of people don't know is that week the players' partners, so some of the players' partners are there with the Australian passports, but I'm pretty sure that the players were promised their partners and their families would be over there by round 1. So they're not. Then that week, they found out that the exemption for their players' partners to go over was denied by the Australian government. So on top of that, they don't know when they're going to see their families. They're over there for 5 months. Every other team gets to play at home from round 8. And then on top of all of that, their coach gets sacked. They're not a happy camp, and a lot of people are going to say toughen up and things like that. But, you're away from your family and things like that. I'd like to see anyone else do it for 5 months. So they're not happy.
So what is it next for the Warriors? I mean, for the fans, I guess, like they're waiting on who will be a replacement coach. And, obviously Todd Payton's standing in the zone at the moment. But when I talk to people in terms of the rugby league world over the past year, whether or not Stephen Kearney was doing a good enough job or whether or not he was the best man for the job, I would always hit back at them, who's going to replace him? Like, it's easy to say, get rid of the coach, they're not winning, get rid of the coach. And I would go, well, who's going to replace him? I had no idea. The people I was talking to had no idea. Do the players know who's going to be at the helm?
And this was the hardest thing because, like I said before, they've replaced him, but what can you change in the club at the moment? You're away from home. You can't. There's not much you can implement or change. And the hardest thing for the players to take is there is no immediate coach coming in. So they've made this decision after 4 games of the resumption, and I don't know where the next step is. Do they have to wait so see how Toddy Payton goes for the rest of the year, and maybe Todd might be the coach, or are we bringing in an experienced coach like Kempy's you ex-coach? You'd know. I don't know where they'd go from here. To be honest,
taking it all in at the minute.
It feels like we need to hear from someone who's been dumped as the Warriors coach before. I mean,
I'll tell you, it's a horror. It is there's a picture.
Word.
There's a picture going around with me standing next to John Hart, but you have a look at it, Peardy, and the guy standing behind it is Dickie, and he's got this big smile on his face.
Oh, Betty.
Oh, yeah. If only he knew I was the bloke that got him to that club, he'd never admit that.
He knows now, mate.
Oh, there's a couple of things in that conversation from Todd. Like the timing is unfortunate. There's no good, two ways about that with the COVID. But as far as the season goes, we're actually 2/3 of the way through a normal season, working into the back end of the year, which we're going to be playing Origin in November. Guys are going to get a short off season. And you'd want to be preparing if they were thinking around giving Mooks the punt, what it sort of looks like for next year. So I don't, like I said straight away on Martin Devlin's show on the weekend, it wasn't made after Saturday night's game. The decision's been brewing around for a long time. It's been in a pot. It's just unfortunate that you got to take into the context of the personalities of the owner and the moment that the decision is made to take his business forward. You got to remember, it's privately owned by Alltex. It's not owned by the shareholding of members or anyone like that that have to go through a board meeting or anything. The guy can make those decisions on the run, which he does. He's got 4 arms to his company. It's worth $140 million, and he's looking at his leaders and he's saying, "Mate, you're not the man to take me forward." So my advice is get on with it. It's decisions is made. The thing about $1 million payouts, a load of crap. He would have signed a contract. They would have been in a position, I'll tell you now, Mark Robinson and his group, Rob Crude, aren't that dumb where they would have signed a contract, let a guy go 6 weeks into his 3-year deal and let him out with a $2 million payout. It just wouldn't happen. So there'd be some form of recompense. But when you're talking about changes and Todd's in there at the moment, the thing you've got to hope is that they can get a decent coach over here, because that's what I want to see. I want to see the likes of a Bellamy or a Bennett with a proven track record that can rebuild the club. Not someone that has to go in and try and pick up the pieces all the time.
That, Tony, like in terms of Craig Bellamy and Wayne Bennett, Mr. Supercoach, and they offered it to Craig Bellamy a few years ago, which he kind of scoffed at and said no. Are you thinking maybe Craig will say yes now because it's more heading towards the end of his career? I mean, do we want Wayne Bennett? Does he really bite his touch still?
Oh, look, I just think Robbo's another one. I think Robbo's another. What the point I'm making is that you need to have a benchmark at the moment. We're going for mediocrity. I think and Blake can answer these questions in a minute, but I think the root cause of the problem goes back probably 2 to 3 years when they started to bring in the likes of Brian Smith. I want to hear what he's got to say. Blake's got to say about O'Sullivan and recruitment. Where does he think those changes are happening in the backroom stars with the likes of Tony Ira and Stacey Jones? How come they were looked over when Tony Ira's been there since 1948? You know what I mean? So there's all the stuff that's going on underneath. And Blake, what if there were changes to be made? What sort of changes would you make, given the fact that you've seen the Brian Smiths and the O'Sullivans come in? You were part of that group when he got punted, Smith, and you've got the backroom staff and all that. What changes do you think? And I'm talking about your player roster too. You're saying about let's bring players. Well, mate, do you think the roster's good enough?
I think the roster's good enough to compete. To be honest, I still thought if Mooks was there this year and maybe Todd can do the job, I still think they can make the 8. And I'm not just saying that because I've been in the camp. I actually believe it. Especially with the new rule changes. What the club needs, to be honest, I'm not too sure. I want to see a pathways in New Zealand. I think next year, I know we've got the Redcliffe situation and things like that, and I think that will further better the club if we have a pathway situation. But the overhaul within the staff and things like that. I'm not too sure. Like Sullivan's the recruitment, and I know a lot of people have lost their job now because of the COVID. So you guys might be better versed who would come in and do a better job or what is needed. You know, Kemp, you've still been at the club and might have been a while ago now, but, you know, you still might know better than me what's needed. Yeah, like I'm not too sure, to be honest.
Well, I will tell you what's needed. They need to get rid of O'Sullivan, mate. That's a no-brainer. The guy
for what? For who?
Well, that's why I'm saying when you're talking about Bellamy, because I think if you get a benchmark, so you might be talking about Bellamy, Robbo, Bennett. Let's say that the guys they've got a really good track record around structure. What happens with just that one signing is a whole structural change. You know what I mean? And then at least if you don't sign them, at least get on the plane. You know, the thing I know about Bellyache is that every year he goes on a study tour up to the States or up to Europe. You know what I mean? So he goes into all the best franchises around the world and he takes a little piece away with him and he brings it back and he puts it into Melbourne. And he's been doing that since day dot. I think what I'm trying to get at is what Robbo and Rob Crook can do, and Cameron George, you know, he's coming out of the racing industry, Cameron, he doesn't know a hell of a lot about rugby league, is they could go into a franchise like Melbourne and sit down with him, and even if you get him as a consultant, say, mate, what would you do? Like, what would you do? Like, let us pick your brains. Let us see, one, can we entice you? And let's talk about enticing them. So take all your small pieces that you're paying people and flick them and put them all in Bellamy's basket so that when you're making an offer, making him a dead set offer, Lavina, because that's why he kicked it out, because it wasn't good enough. And the second part of that is take what he's got and build it over a long period of time. And I think you're right, maybe he is ready. You know, coaches, you know, they're talking about coaches' contracts just like players' contracts. They're, mate, $2, they're worth $2 these days. They walk out of them left, right and centre. Look, Kearney had a 3-year contract. Look where he is.
Yeah, I think they were hoping that from Mooks because he had that kind of apprenticeship role under Craig Bellamy, and that's where the old owners thought he's the right man for the job. I don't know if he was the right man for the job or not, Tony. I'm not questioning that, and now the job's done, move on. I'm questioning the timing of it. I think the timing in terms of benefiting the Warriors throughout the year and the fans, it's almost like, I don't know if the owners have had a chat with Cameron George and have said, mate, it's a whitewash year anyway. We're not going to win too many because we're playing overseas and we can hardly get their families over there. So let's get rid of the coach now and do what we can. But I think team culture-wise, when I think of the culture within, and I know we use this word really loosely in rugby league, but if I think of the teams that are doing really good in this competition, when I look at that team culture and how well they're doing, it stems down from a great leader and players that are willing to go to war for that great leader. And whether or not Stephen Kearney was the man for the job, you get a feeling an assistant coach that's going to jump into that role for the rest of the year. They're not going to go to war and die for anyone at the moment. In fact, they sound pissed off to me. They sound really upset that this decision has been made without even discussing with those players how they would feel about it. It's like an owner said, he's not the right man for the job. Let's get this shit sorted now because they're overseas and not going to win too many and we'll see what happens and write the season off. How do you think the Warriors players feel about that? I know as a part-time Warriors fan, I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, well, you boys feel free to jump in here because, you know, I don't want.
Yeah, I don't want to hear Tony rattle on from his
I don't want
place
to. I don't want to rain on Lavina's parade, but I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it from a totally different position here. That the guy's got, you know, he's obviously doing all right. You know, his business is somewhere in the vicinity of $100 to $200 million. You know what I mean? So
it's a business decision. Like, let's be honest, that's all it was. Yeah. It was nothing to do with feeling.
And if you want to talk about timing, well, what about Anthony Griffiths when he got punted from Penrith?
Yeah.
What about Madge Maguire when he got punted from South Sydney? You know what I mean? So I know it hurts, but the decision has been made to take the business forward, and they've seen it as not the person to lead the business. That's unfortunate. It happened to me. It's unfortunate.
I agree with that because I think it wasn't just a thing that came up after the weekend. I think it has been brewing, and like we said, Robbo is a very successful businessman. You know, and he's taken the club. So if that's what he thinks, well, we're going to have to live with it. But I also agree with you, Lavina. And when you're saying like they got sacked at different times, you got to remember this isn't like any other year. The Warriors are over in Central Coast in a camp field for 7 weeks. So it's not like, hey, we're in a season, he's going to get sacked after 6 rounds when we're back and forth. We can do things at home and away. We're stuck in a bubble with not much restrictions. So, yeah, I don't know where to go from here.
My thoughts on it were, I thought Stephen Kearney was the right man. I thought that he'd had enough time in Melbourne to learn the stuff that how they became successful and how they are a successful franchise. He's also got that Polynesian background, so he'll know the culture and he'll be respected by the Poly boys and the Māoris. Like it is what it is. He is our perfect person to take this club, respecting its culture that it's always had and turning that culture into a winning one. And it's what scares me now is that no matter who they bring in, if it's an Aussie who's got a high record, he's going to go and implant what's made another club successful. And I fear that he goes and says, you know what, you can screw the culture that we've got here in New Zealand and what makes us great rugby league players and what makes us, a whānau to a certain extent, the fan base, how we play the game, how we are amongst the fans, the humbleness, all that kind of stuff that makes the Warriors who they are. And he's going to try and coach that out of them to make him a successful Australian team. That was my fear. And I thought that Mooks was going to be the guy who could take the best of Australia and implant it within our culture here at the Warriors. But that's not the case.
And I don't know with this next decision on the next coach, if they replace it with Todd or another Aussie or someone from England. I'm not necessarily saying they need a Kiwi coach here, but it would be nice someone that, I was listening to Paul Kent last night on 360. It is Kent, isn't it? Is it Kent? Yeah, it's
yes.
Kent.
Don't mistakenly say
it's Kent.
Paul Hunt. No, it's Paul Kent. And I agree with anything he said last night on NRL 360, carrying on about the biggest problem for the Warriors is they need to have more Australian players. And we did it, with Campion and Steve Price came over and it's the way forward and they shouldn't have let Maloney go. I'm not opposed to having Australian players. I think there's enough Kiwi players, though, still to make this New Zealand side successful. They all get poached. They all get taken overseas by recruitment officers that know exactly what they're doing. And they're targeting these kids at the age of 15 to 17. So I've always agreed with Tony on League and Order from the beginning of the show about a development program where we can introduce these young rugby players into rugby league as teenagers and not lose them overseas to, the Silvertails, Manly and the Roosters and try and nurture them here. I don't think we need a whole ton of Australian players to take the Warriors to a premiership. I'm not even sure if we need an Australian coach. I do know what we've had over the last probably 2 or 3 years hasn't worked for the Warriors. The action needed to be taken. But I don't know if we need an influx of those Australian players to say that's what we need. And Blake, no offence either, I'm not even sure with this deal that we're doing with our recruitment in a secondary grade with Queensland is going to be something that the Warriors need in the future. I know it sounds...
I agree.
Affiliated with them, but there's a shitload of talent here, mate, that we could tap into and nurture, and we're not doing it. And I think if we did, the Warriors would benefit from it in half a decade's time.
And I agree. I totally agree. Being over here now for 5 years and seeing everything that New Zealand has to offer from the junior ranks, I thought the SG Ball this year, they were going unbelievable.
Yeah.
The 16-year-olds, they were killing it. But obviously that's now, I don't know what the comp's going to be like next year. We've only got the Redcliffe team. Once again, I go back to Robbo being a successful businessman, and I think we can't judge what that Redcliffe thing's going to bring until we see the final outcome. But I agree, we need something to be done in New Zealand. We need
100%.
pathways. I just don't. I don't have the answer. I don't have ideas. I reckon if we could fund it, we'd have a SG Ball. I reckon we should have every team because we would be so dominant. But I just don't know what teams they can afford, what teams they will have.
And I'll go back to the structure. That sort of. You need someone that actually understands how to structure a development backbone for the Warriors so that when you are bringing in these Aussie players that you're talking about, the thing about bringing in a whole host of Australian players is you just don't have the salary cap to do that. But when you do bring them and you're bringing them key components to a structure that are going to make a difference to a team the ones that went to the grand final, the Michael Lux, the Kevin Campions, the Ivan Clearys, the Brent Webbs, even Johnny Carlaw, that was a second-rate centre running around at the back end of his career, but could fill a hole in a team that was full of structures. Let me take you back to the junior structure. The last time they put a junior structure in this country was in 2002. It produced 14 Kiwis. Simon Mannering, these guys all played in the same competition. It was an under-18 competition. Simon Mannering, Isaac Gluck played for Wellington with Ben Matalino and Russell Packer. Up in Auckland, they had Lisan Mo. He was one of the Auckland props, along with the Epulama Luaki, Thomas Luluai, Ivan Tumavavi, and Jerome Ropati, and the list goes on and on. So the point that Blake's saying is that there are talent here. And let me put this myth to bed. There are Super 15 franchises over this country and schools competitions that are producing oval ball footballers that rugby league are constantly have a misguided representation of trying to recruit them into a structure. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. So they need to restructure the way they think and build the backbone. And they've got historical evidence, if they want to spend some time looking at it, that those Kiwi boys that came out of the last time they did that, they were the backbone for a long, long time in this Warriors team and took them to 2 grand finals.
All right, well, I feel like this is a good place to leave that. We're purged. We now know how we're all feeling about Mooks and the Warriors. I know, Lavina, you wanted to talk about the pace of the game and how what was that you, Kemp? One of the two of you. Pace of the game.
Tony after this one, but I wasn't too sure about the new rule and how would it affect the game. And I remember texting Tony a couple of times throughout a few matches saying, mate, it's fast. It's such a quick game. Rugby league is getting faster by the minute, let alone by the year and the decade. And the play we see now compared to 10 years ago, it's tremendously fast. But the new rules that have been introduced, I've been weighing up my options whether or not I love this whole, rather than give a penalty, let the attacking team have another set of 6. And initially I really liked it because I did a quick little bit of maths and I thought the amount of penalties they give in a game prior to the rule coming in was 22 seconds a penalty. It would slow the game down and you'd miss out on maybe 4 or 5 minutes of attacking play of rugby league. So the more rugby league you see, the better it is. And I'm a big fan of that. But I have noticed a couple of things in the last probably 2 rounds since coming out of COVID. I've noticed a lot more head-high tackles, which is something that whether or not its teams are being instructed to do it or they're panicking to get onside because they can't do that, or it's just a little bit of fatigue coming into play. It's probably something that we're not a big fan of in the game. I'm all right with a bit of biff, and I don't mind a shoulder charge, but I'm not a big fan of taking someone's head off. So I'm not a big head-high tackle fan when it comes to rugby league, and I think there's something like 65% more head-high tackles now this time compared to last year with this new increased pace of the ball. So I'd love to know what the players think about it, Blake, because as a fan, I watched it and I love the pace of it. And now I'm starting to see a little bit of carelessness introduced into the game. Mind you, we've only got 1 referee as well. Whether or not that was a financial decision or something, to stop the whistle blowing, which I'm another big fan of because I like the game to play. But can that referee control the ruck as much as what he used to be able to with 2 of them? Now that the game's faster, I just don't want to see as many head-high tackles. And it's the only blight I think I have within this new fastest game of rugby league. What are the players thinking about it, Blake?
They love it. Because you think rugby league got boring for a bit. Rugby league was everyone's doing the same play. The same play, this. Now it's who's got the smartest brain. Oh, there's, without getting too technical, there's 4 players on 3. Let's go that way, and it's playing faster and players are going to get more tired. And that's probably why we're seeing the head highs, because players are getting a lot more tired and just can't keep up with the pace. But the players are loving it. I'll speak to a couple of the boys and being outside back in these days when they kick down into a corner, you got to run out and run out and hope you don't get your head taken off or get belted. You just know it's a sacrifice run. But these days, everyone's too tired, so you get free reign. You can run, have a bit of time before you hit the fence. It's brought, like for the Warriors, Cody Nikorima back into the picture of being a great ball player, like a good half, So, but, mate, I think, the players love it.
Yeah, I would like to think it's fatigue that's led to these head highs rather than this bush league kind of go out and take someone's head off. We need a rest.
Kempy would have told his players that before back in the day, wouldn't he? He just said, "Go out, and take this bloke out."
Mate, monkey see, monkey do. You know what I mean? Just put a few holes in the wall before they run out, and there you go, boys, go and do that out of the field. It's like a little bit like you driving a car, Lavina. You know, the more speed you get, the more likely you're going to have a crash and write the thing off. So I quite like the speed of the game. I think Blake has hit the nail right on the head. It's taken that shit structure that they have with the lead runners and the sweep runners out of it and brought footballers back in it that can play footy. We spoke last week about the amount of penalties and even the sin bins that come on the back of it. If you create something in the NRL at the moment that is good for the game, and coaches will try and coach it out of the game. You know what I mean? And I think the referees on the weekend played a really good card. They just blew penalties and sent blokes to the sin bin to try and keep that open flow going. But you want to sort of have a look at it across the board. Now, Trebojevic goes down with a hamstring injury. I don't think he's going to be the last. I think we're going to see a lot more of those. You saw Walker go down. His one had looked a little bit like there was a defection in the pitch with the way that he fell. But fatigue is going to start to play a bit of, player management for the coaches and their scientists in their side to say how we're going to manage them at the back end of the year, because if they're travelling at such high speeds for such long periods of time, they're not going to get through the rest of the season. You know, so it's going to be interesting to see. That one comment you made, Lavina, which I think is still needs to be sorted out. There is a time to give a penalty instead of a repeat set of 6.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There could be a time in a game where it's really close and the team wants a penalty so they can take a shot at goal, or they want a penalty so they can just regroup. So I think that if you're looking at enhancing that current structure around the ruck, it may be that you've got someone watching that whole, a separate person like an ex-coach watching it going, mate, if they do it again, they need a penalty. You know what I mean? And he's filtering it down to the referees in the air. Because the referees, you can just tell them, they're going, 6 again. They're not thinking about the context of where the game is and what time it is on the clock and the momentum swings and shifts and stuff like that. So probably could be quite a good asset if you had an ex-coach sitting next to the guy in the top room saying, mate, we're in the penalty stage now. If they're going to give another one away, stop the game, give a penalty.
I like that. So like the Bush League call comes down, send on the head higher.
Get them on. Get Ayshford on.
Get on.
Blake, listen, Blake. This is you, mate. You've been waiting all year for this one moment, all right? Go on there and take Teddy's head off. All right? Got it up. I'm going to get you to Maldives for 8 weeks, brother. All right? You just go and do me a job.
I like that. That speaking of Teddy, wow, that contact.
You know, the thing about that, I know we've spoken about it, but what I didn't like was when they started getting on Facebook and saying that they were comparing him to Jonah Lomu. You know what I mean? Come on, mate. Like, obviously a lot of the Aussies didn't watch the footage of Jonah Lomu. But, you know, they might want to go and ask Mike Catt what he felt like, because he was never the same after Jonah ran over him in that England game.
Nah, Teddy would have bounced off him and ended up in the front row like Piggy, just clapping at him as he scored the try if Lomu had been running at him.
That was a good game of footy, though. I mean, I really, everyone's talking about that hit on Tedesco from Mike Acevo, but there was a couple of, you know, turning points in that game, you know, and it might have been a defensive move maybe from Dylan Brown onto Luke Keary, or the fact that the Eels came back from not scoring a point in the first half and then charging and looking on top, and then all of a sudden Keary just gets around one player, Marnie misses Keary, and then all of a sudden it's a try to the Roosters and the momentum completely changed within 30 seconds of that match. I thought on attack it was an impressive game of rugby league, but I loved watching the defensive aspects. And it comes down to, I've said to you guys, it's a young man's game, and it's the young guys that are stars of the show, and it's the young guys that'll take it forward. But it was some of the old timers, you know, like sent to the bench, but he played well and truly below his average age out on that pitch. And the Morris boys, I mean, they're not getting any younger. They are so big for such fast men. They're huge, absolutely huge. and they stole the show for the Roosters. And I think the Roosters proved to so many people they'll be there at the end of the year. It was humbling for the Eels, but the Eels can probably take out of that, apart from that massive hit on Tedesco that everyone talks about, they could take out of that they're still capable of being there at the end of the year, which is, I think, what they needed to get out of it. It was a great game of rugby league. I really enjoyed that match.
Yeah, I kind of feel like at the moment the games are pretty even at a certain point, or most games are, and there are just a tiny little wee swing of momentum that, you know, it might be a missed try and then all of a sudden scoring at the other end. And because the speed of the game it's so quick now, you see some teams just rack up a quick score and then all of a sudden it takes a lot to be able to spin it around again. I'm hesitant to suggest that might be the case when the Warriors played in the weekend, but they seemed like they were in it for a lot of the game. It didn't feel like that scoreline reflected, you know, I guess what I was seeing on the field at least, and that's probably because I'm one-eyed. But let's move forward. Let's do a couple of things first. We're going to talk about our player of the round. You two will have a player of the round each, and then a new little segment that you wanted to bring, Lavina, which I quite like, player that the Warriors could use right now. Kemp, you can start with who was your player of the round for you.
Well, I've got a couple of players, mate. I think it's one.
You can't have a couple. We say this every week. Every week.
You know what? I'll tell you what. When your wife has twins, are you going to say to her you can't have a couple?
Oh, yours are a set of twins.
How is that even a thing?
Exactly, mate. You throw it's like you know, you're a sentry. I'm the general. You're like throwing your grenade already, and I've got like 100 ready to come back at you.
Speaking of throwing, I was standing on Ponsonby Road earlier in the weekend, and I was talking to somebody, and I thought I'd walked out on the road because this massive Mercedes, might I add, was like, get off the road, and it scared me shitless because I had thought I'd wandered out onto the road, and it was Kemp. He was just like, so go on, Kemp, you have your two then.
Yeah. Well, it's the Morris brothers, mate. It's the Morris brothers. I thought for the a couple of efforts that they put in on the weekend. Back to back, I thought were outstanding, but just the way that they've come into this team together, and we were talking about players that make a difference to a football team. Like, I'm just thinking, man, why didn't we sign those two to bring them over here to the Warriors? Because they would have just changed the whole way that we were thinking, you know, just on purely age and effort. And I thought on the weekend, like defensively and offensively, the Eels and Sydney City the best defensive side, but they're both up there offensively as well. That was the game of the round, and I just saw that effort going way, you know, to and fro. And I don't think it was that they were better. I think that they had more experience. That's what got them home. You know, they just, when it got to 10-8 and Paris thought, we're actually, because they had the momentum for the last 20 minutes, we're going to come over the top of them. Sydney City went from third gear into fifth and just went, righto, boys, see you later, and just steamrolled over them. And I thought the Morris boys had a big part of that. I wouldn't be surprised if they got players back.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you along the lines of a set of twins. Initially, I was going to pick Boyd Cordner as my player of the round, not just because he backed up for that winning try, but he was like a captain fantastic. He didn't make any mistakes. He doesn't abuse the shit out of his plays. He gets close to the top of the tackle count. He gets close to the top of yardage. And he's a natural leader. He's got that natural leadership. And when he crossed backing up, it was good to see a back row backing up so quickly and so keen for the ball. And he was almost like, I'm the captain, I have to do it, and I have to lead the team that way. So I was tempted to go that way. But my player of the round went to a half a set of twins. And talking about purchasing a couple of players, when I found out the Trebojevic brothers were going to be available at the end of last year, I thought, there's the lotto win purchase. That's who we need at the Warriors. Imagine purchasing Tom at 23 and Jake at 25. And everyone said that they would never leave Manly, but if there was an option to build a club around a set of players, they're the players that you purchase for a club because they give it their all. And my player of the round, I'd have to give it to a fullback who probably is in the worst position in the competition because it's so fierce with, you know, Tedesco there and two of us, Sheck, and just about every other fullback, including Latrell Mitchell, that's out there to prove they're the best number one in the game. But when I thought about Tom Trbojevic at the weekend to not only score a try and carry three players over the line, to run the most perfect line to set up the next try, and then to snap a hammy, which I know they're saying it's not snapped, but it's the same hamstring that he injured twice last year that kept him out for 15 months of the game. I just think he's a tremendous addition to a club and what he could do in that small amount of time. And when he was taken off, I got the feeling Manly went, Manly came off. Some of those old guys from the Sea Eagles, including Desi Hasler, their leader, said that's probably one of the most satisfying victories we've had in the past 10 years for Manly. And I watched them lose the grand final against the Roosters, where Dally Terry Evans actually won that bloody Man of the Match award, and they played very well in that game. But for him to come out and say that is because of players like Tom and Jake Trbojevic that never, ever, ever, ever give up. And even when he was replaced with a hamstring injury, Manly said, we can win it without this superstar. So what he does on the pitch and what he does off the pitch was enough to give my player of the round to Turbo Tom as my favourite fullback for this round of competition.
Yeah.
See how fucking hard was that,
Yeah.
Kempy? There were two brothers
Mate,
to choose
it's not
from. She
hard.
chose one. Easy
I
as
don't know, mate. I went to sleep when she started talking about hamstring. Seriously, I was starting to think about hamburgers and the white lady at 10 o'clock tonight.
And was just out of curiosity, was that who you're thinking when suggesting the idea that a player that the Warriors could totally use right now and could change it? No. Who is?
No, that was last year, Peardy. That was
Right.
I got a different.
Okay, just quickly before you go into it, because I'm muting you.
Real short, because I don't want Tony Kemp to fall asleep again. But if I could have bought a player from the round that I just witnessed for the Warriors, I would pick Api Coruscant, mainly because he has a fantastic ability to target players that are bloody knackered. And he's not just going, you're a pig, you're a prop, I'm going to run around you.
Oh, come on, don't say that about those beautiful looking blokes.
He picks a player that is absolutely exhausted and tired, and he makes them pay and suffer. And he's copied the game of Cameron Smith, who we played against at the weekend and played better than the greatest man in the competition at 37 years of age, now that he's had a birthday. But the way that Uppy basically made the opposition punish on defence if they were bludging, he knows when to quicken the game up, but what's beautiful about his play, he knows when to slow it down. And there's a lot of players in his position that don't know how to do that. I love the pace of the game. I love the way he read it. I love the way he tried to copy one of his mentors. He's the player that I wish the Warriors would have next weekend.
Because I haven't said which player they have, and I'll never say that they need another player, because I think currently if you bring players in here, their level is going to go down, not up. I think what they need is a coach. And I'm just going to brief on, if it was me talking to Craig Bellamy, I would sign Craig Bellamy to a lifetime deal. So I'd pay him his $1 million, and I'd say, I'm going to sign you to a lifetime deal for the rest of your life. I'm going to look after you. I'm going to use the 4 businesses that I've got across this commercial sector. And when you step out of league, I'm going to look after you every year with a $250,000 salary, and you can just come in and be a leadership consultant for me over my wider business, including the Warriors, and you can oversee the team like that. That's the type of innovation that you need to go and take to the table when you're talking about trying to get someone like Bellamy over. Not, here's $1 million. Because I'll tell you what, there's 15 other clubs doing the same thing. Do something different. And if you want Tom Trbojevic to come, you're going to need Bellamy, not Todd Payton.
That's a good idea, Kempy. I like that.
I'm along the same lines, Kempy, but I was going a bit different. I would bring Cameron Smith over for a year to play and just teach all the young kids about how to act, how to lead, how to do all these things, because he's the greatest player possibly that's ever played the game. 500 games, whatever he ends up on. But he can teach so much more off the field as much as he can teach on the field. And I think having him there would, as a player as well, would teach the players how to play properly, how to react in different situations. I reckon I'd bring him over for a year. I'd say, mate, I don't care how long you play for.
I'll take him.
I like that. Why do you hate our hookers that we have at the moment, though? Like, why do you not think they're good? You don't like Jazz? Like,
I'm just dreaming. No, Jazz isn't a hooker.
No.
Jazz can't pass. Jazz knows that.
All right, then. Well, we've got to wrap it up because we've been rattling on. I feel like we have purged really, really well. Just really quickly, of course, right at the end of each show, we like to go through the fight card. This weekend, round 7. Who are we thinking will be the main event? I'm looking at, as I roll through the games, I was looking at probably the number one for me would be the Eels Raiders. Would I be correct in
100%.
saying that is our main event on the cards?
I reckon that, or maybe the Bunnies Panthers. Panthers have become my second favourite team all of a sudden, because you look at you line up a player list, and you compare and you go, he's going to get a point, he's going to get a point, he's going to get a point, and the Panthers continue to surprise us. I think it'd be really cool to see Nathan Cleary up against Adam Reynolds. I'm a big fan of both of those players because they have a great kicking game. Tony Kemp,
we love kicking. Thank you.
MP.
Go and play rugby if you want to kick.
So they're probably the two, the Eels Raiders, both coming off losses that need a victory. And also I think the Bunnies and the Panthers. And I think, the Panthers had those injuries a couple of years ago, and it was almost like they should be in the finals, but they're not. They should be. And there's something about that club that looks as though they're culturally sound. And if they're in a good place, I reckon that they'll have a victory over the Bunnies. They're the two games for me.
There's only one game this weekend, and it's the Warriors who take on Melbourne. Because we want to see how the boys bounce back and whether Blake's right, whether they're going to actually show up. Because apparently, I think Blake is saying that they're probably not going to show up. They're disgruntled, but they're going to either turn that disgruntledness into passion and desire and a winning attitude, or they can go out and get their asses kicked. So I don't really care about the other games. I want to see how these boys back up.
I get that. We're clearing away the main events of the fight card completely, and we're going to go with the Warriors versus the Storm.
So expect a barrage of texts when that game comes on. It's either going to be good or very, very bad.
Yeah. Hey, Aish, how much longer in lockdown before you're allowed out?
Week and a half.
What's it been like? Is it crazy? Do they give you the meals? Talk us through it.
No, the meals aren't too bad. It's sort of like takeaway every night. I'm getting itchy. It feels like I'm in the pen doing a stretch, eyeing out a couple of people. Then I've got to take out, make some shanks.
You're losing weight, mate. Have you been doing those press-ups and going for long walks?
Piss off, mate.
You know what? He said to me when he flew back, he was like, you know what I'm going to do, bro? I'm going to lock in. Press-ups, chin-ups.
Get fit.
You know why? Blake, are you a chance now that Mooks is gone?
Yeah.
All right, team. Enjoy your weekend worth of league. This has been fun. We'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thanks.
See you later, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.